Chapter 4, Year 3, Part 1. The TV was on in the living room when Harry came in. Dudley lounged in an armchair, while Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon sat on the sofa, watching the news. "The public is warned that Black is armed and extremely dangerous. A special hotline has been set up, and any sighting of Black should be reported at once." Harry's heart fluttered nervously inside his chest, and his palms felt sweaty as he stared at the grim image of the escaped convict. He'd been waiting for this, hoping that it would happen this way, but now came the really delicate stage when he could botch everything up. Uncle Vernon, however, proceeded to give him the perfect opening. "Hang on!" he shouted, the walrus moustache quivering in rage. "You didn't tell us where that maniac has run away from." "Right you are, Vernon. These people—" Harry willed his face to remain calm, as he interjected with an air of nonchalance. "Oh, Sirius Black? He's broken out of Azkaban, the wizard prison." For a moment there was deathly silence. Aunt Petunia went an alarming shade of white, while Uncle Vernon's face, conversely, flushed a deep red colour. "You!" he snarled. "How dare you mention its unnaturalness under our roof?" Harry hoped desperately that the plan would work. Otherwise he was sure Uncle Vernon would take great delight in punishing him for bringing up magic when he'd been expressly forbidden to do so. "Well," Harry said, "I figured you might want to know, seeing as this maniac had escaped from prison in order to kill me. So don't be surprised if you see him somewhere in this area. He probably has a wand, so try not to anger him. He has killed a dozen muggles with one spell." Dudley whimpered and tried to curl into a ball in his armchair. Uncle Vernon looked for a moment as if he would suffer a stroke. But then, "There's a lunatic after you, endangers my family, and you're just... I refuse to tolerate this madness. My sister is meant to be coming soon. How dare you put us all at such great risk, you worthless... Out! I want you out of this house, and Petunia, we're leaving. Marge can visit some other time. We're leaving now." Harry could only stare in amazement, vividly reminded of that time 2 years ago when Uncle Vernon had insisted they all leave Privet Drive in an attempt to escape Hogwarts letters. The chaos and panic were similar, except for the lack of yellow parchment cluttering the place. Uncle Vernon was sputtering and stomping around, pulling suitcases out of the cupboard under the stairs. Aunt Petunia was dashing about, trying to pack, but refusing to let go of the still terrified Dudley. "Don't just stand around, boy. I told you to get out." Harry nodded obediently, and grabbing his own trunk, raced up to his room. Things were going a bit too well. He'd calculated that he'd have a couple of days before everyone left the house, so that he could warn Neville to pick him up. Now, though, there was no time. Harry would have to catch the night bus Blaise had told him about. Good thing he'd considered a plan B at all, or he'd have much more of a problem. Harry snorted. He'd have even more of a problem had Blaise and Millicent not informed him that his godfather had escaped from Azkaban with the goal to kill him. He'd received no official notification whatsoever. Were the wizarding authorities trying to keep him in the dark on purpose? If not for his friends and their parents' ministry connections, Harry would not even have known he was in danger. Hedwig hooted in her incomprehension from her perch at the window-sill, snapping him out of his reverie. "Yes," Harry agreed. He fumbled for stationery and penned a quick note to Neville to let him know he was coming pretty much straight away. Harry hoped it wouldn't seem too rude. He was quite apprehensive about that grandmother of Neville's, truth be told. Hedwig pecked Harry's fingers gently as he fastened the letter to her leg. Harry smiled. "Take it to Neville, okay? As fast as possible, if you don't mind. And stay there. I don't think I'll be coming back here this summer. Thankfully." Hedwig seemed to agree with Harry's assessment. She, too, quite disliked being at the Dursleys. She ended up locked in her cage far too much of the time. Harry sighed, watching her fly off. "Now, what am I forgetting?" He looked over his mail from last night, sorting what to take with him and what to leave behind. The Monster Book of Monsters was, unfortunately, coming with him. Harry looked at it skeptically and double-checked the belt holding its jaws together. He wouldn't put it past the horrid tome to come free of its bindings and eat the contents of his trunk. What next? Then... "Ah! Uncle Vernon?" "What now, boy?" You just need to sign this form before I leave, saying you're letting me go, you know."
"Hurry up, give it here, and leave already before I toss you out on your ear."
Harry could barely contain his glee as he watched his uncle put his signature on the Hogsmeade form without reading the document properly. He heard Dudley arguing with Aunt Petunia.
"But, Duddykins, I want to check my TV. I want to. What is there to do with stupid Mallorca? I want my computer. I want my video games. I want—"
"Sweetums, this isn't the time." He was finally getting out of here. Harry tried very hard not to smile as he thanked his uncle and ran upstairs to put the signed form in his trunk. Giving a final glance to the room, he picked up the suitcase. Now for the final leg of the plan, getting to Neville's without being killed by Sirius Black on the way. If Harry's sudden arrival inconvenienced Neville, neither he nor his grandmother uttered a word about it. Harry was promptly assigned a spacious bedroom, shown around the house, and then taken for a stroll around the gardens by a shyly enthusiastic Neville. Hermione had apparently been unable to visit this summer, as she was travelling through France with her parents, and Harry understood, more from what Neville didn't say than from his actual words, that there weren't many kids around his age in the area, so he was used to having no one but elderly relatives for company. A visit from a friend was, for him, a rare treat. Neville and Harry spent their days exploring the manor, playing games and occasionally studying, on the direction of Neville's grandmother. Right now they were stretched out on a lawn in front of the house, taking in the sun and exchanging lazy conversation.
"And that is the window which great Uncle Algy threw me out of to see whether I had magic in me."
"That's terrifying, Neville."
"Well, I bounced back up."
"Still terrifying. I bet you have, tons of traumas from that."
Maybe. Oh no, we're going to be late for lunch."
"Race you to the dining hall." They both ran, laughing, across the lawn towards the steps of the Longbottom Manor, only to skid to a halt outside the dining hall doors. Neither of them would dare to just burst in there, knowing that Augusta Longbottom was probably waiting on the other side. They hastily smoothed down their hair, Harry's attempt predictably futile, and straightened their clothes before entering the room at last.
"Ah, here you are!" Neville's grandmother nodded sharply. "Come, the lunch is waiting. Where have you been?"
Then, without waiting for an answer,
"Well, no matter. Potter, do you mind explaining to me why I've got a letter from Albus Dumbledore asking me to warn him should I invite you to visit in the future?"
Harry froze in the act of lifting a spoon to his mouth. "I'm sorry, what, Ma'am?"
"A letter, boy, from Dumbledore. Are you deaf?"
Harry put the spoon back down in the soup. "No, ma'am, I don't know why Dumbledore is writing to you." Augusta Longbottom seemed to find his answer lacking, if the expression on her face was anything to go by.
"Does this concern me or you, Potter? There, listen. It has come to my attention that Harry Potter is visiting the Longbottom Manor of July 31st. I would be greatly indebted to you if you could agree on such visits with me prior to inviting young Harry into your home. And why should I, Potter? Can you tell me that? How is it any of his business who visits my grandson?"
Harry was scowling. "It isn't any of his business. How does he even know I'm here?" Mrs. Longbottom sent him a piercing stare.
"So Dumbledore is keeping an eye on the boy who lived. Understandable, considering his and your position, but I resent it when conniving headmasters try to interfere in my affairs. Do you hear, Potter? I am no student, and my home is not a school."
"I apologize for the inconvenience, ma'am," Harry answered, inwardly seething and probably doing a poor job of hiding it.
"Angry, are you?"
The elderly woman smiled unpleasantly.
"I am not surprised. I will be writing to Dumbledore to tell him that he has to try harder to convince me that I want to keep him informed. However, he is not the kind of man to give up easily. You are the boy who lived, after all," she said with relish.
"That doesn't give him any right to keep tabs on me. He's not my legal guardian or anything." Harry was aware that his fists were clenched and that he was glaring into his abandoned meal, but he could do little to quell his fury. Not only had nobody from Hogwarts informed Harry officially about Sirius Black and the danger he posed, but Dumbledore was actually spying on him behind his back, making it his business where Harry went and whom he interacted with. He'd thought well of the ancient wizard before, though, so maybe there was a rational explanation for the ill-chosen course of action here. Maybe Dumbledore wasn't spying on Harry while keeping him in the dark, but doing, well, something else?
Potter, quit sulking.
Augusta Longbottom drew her eyebrows threateningly, changing the subject.
And eat up. Your skin and bones. Boy, do these muggle relatives of yours feed you at all?
Harry flushed and looked back down into his soup. Really, had Neville not assured him his grandmother seemed to like him, he'd think that the woman completely detested him. Maybe Neville was delusional. That was perfectly feasible. After all, his Uncle Algy had dropped him on his head back in childhood. The month spent at Neville's had felt like real holiday to Harry, but he was still glad to board the Hogwarts Express. It felt good to know he'd be back at the castle soon. He and Neville separated on the train, Neville going off to search for Hermione, and Harry joining Blaise and Millicent in their compartment. They greeted him amicably enough, and asked about his stay in the Den of Gryffindors. Harry snorted and tried to evade their questioning. He wasn't sure how much Neville wanted them to know about his home. Millicent gave him an unimpressed eye. Clearly his tactics didn't fool her. "You and your notions, Potter," she said flatly, but did introduce a new subject. "So have you seen Sirius Black anywhere?" "Millie, if I had, I wouldn't be alive to talk to you today." Blaise nodded in agreement, looking uncharacteristically solemn. "Yes, Black's not the kind of guy you want to— Why are we slowing down? It's not yet time for us to arrive." Suddenly all lights went out. It was really quite unnerving, sitting in a dark compartment while God knew what was happening out there. "I really don't like this," Millicent said with affected calm, just as her cat mewed worriedly. Harry peered out the window, hoping for some glimpse of— "Wait, I think someone's boarding the train." "Who is it?" Blaise asked uneasily. Clearly Harry wasn't the only one thinking of Black at the moment. Distant yells were heard from somewhere beyond their compartment. Next came the sound of feet running, someone swearing, and then, slowly, the door handle started to turn. Harry gazed at it, seized by horror for some reason he could not account for. He pressed himself into the wall near the window as a silhouette of a hooded figure came into view. The temperature seemed to drop by several degrees. Then the figure emitted a breathy noise, as if sucking on air, and Harry could only think a Dementor before he felt himself sliding off his seat, his vision oddly clouded. He felt so cold, as if submerged icy water, and someone was screaming, far away, and Harry couldn't quite hear, but he was sure it was a woman. "Harry!" Hands were shaking him. He groaned. "Harry, wake up! I'm warning you!" He felt his cheek sting from a slap. Wincing, he finally opened his eyes. He was lying on the floor, the lights were back on, the Dementor was gone, and the train was moving again. The worried faces of Blaise and Millie loomed over him. "Don't do that again," Millie scowled fiercely. "Dropping like that. Let's get you up." For once Harry didn't reject help, as Blaise and Millicent tugged him back into his seat. "Who screamed?" Blaise looked pale. "No one screamed, Harry. You fainted. You must have heard it in your head." Harry was going to reply, not that he had any idea what to say after he'd so shamefully fainted in front of his classmates, when the compartment door slid open once again. Harry tensed, but the intruder was human this time, a haggard-looking man with light brown hair. His robes were shabby, and he looked exhausted, but the wand was firm in his hand. "Are you all right? I saw a Dementor being chased away from this compartment." The man trailed off as his eyes landed on Harry. Harry was not in the mood for being gawked at by fans of The Boy Who Lived, so he chose to keep silent and wait for the stranger to snap out of it. The man's eyes widened as he took in Harry's appearance. He stared at the slithering crest on Harry's robes for a bit, then shook his head and withdrew a chocolate bar from his pocket. "Here," he said, his voice calm, and handed pieces of chocolate to the 3 Slytherins. "This should make you feel better. Now if you'll excuse me." He nodded, with a parting glance at Harry, took his leave. Silence reigned as Harry, Blaise, and Millie nibbled on their chocolate. Harry found that it really did make him feel immediately better. "That was weird," Blaise commented, not specifying whether he meant the Dementor, Harry's collapse, or the odd man's scrutiny. Millie's black cat jumped onto her favourite perch on Blaise's lap, demanding to be petted, and Blaise absently obliged. "Why do you think they'd let Dementors on their train? Millicent asked darkly. Because they're idiots, Harry grumbled. Because a soulless Harry Potter is a lot easier to protect from Sirius Black, Blaise suggested. Harry grimaced and inquired in a falsely sweet tone. Have I ever told you, Blaise, that you're horribly morbid? Harry watched as his classmates came up to hippogriffs, one by one, bowing cautiously, or in Neville's case, backing away in fear. He was still trying to catch his breath after that highly uncomfortable ride on Buckbeak. Honestly, if he didn't like Hagrid so much... He glanced around, looking for Malfoy. Harry had seen him talking to Crabbe and Goyle before, completely disregarding Hagrid's instructions, and it would be so like Malfoy to disrupt the lesson out of sheer spite. The blonde boy was patting Buckbeak condescendingly. "This is very easy," he said, giving a disdainful sniff. "I knew it would be, of course, if Potter could do it. You're not dangerous at all, are you, you ugly great brute?" Harry reacted on instinct. He saw out of the corner of his eye as the hippogriff reared on his hind legs and prepared to strike, so he dove towards Malfoy and shoved him out of the way. Then he felt pain, and his vision went blurry from shock. He heard screams from other students, and Malfoy high-pitched right next to his ear. "You're bleeding! You're bleeding on me! Stop bleeding on me! You... Look what you have done! You sorry excuse of a teacher! Your beast has murdered Harry Potter!" And then Harry felt himself being picked up, and the fog in his head cleared enough for him to understand that he was lying in Hagrid's arms, and Hagrid was running towards the castle, chanting a litany of, "I'm sorry," seemingly without being aware of it. Harry tried to say it was okay and not Hagrid's fault at all, but his arm got jostled slightly, which sent a spike of sharp pain all through his body. He bit his lip in an attempt to not cry out. Thankfully they arrived in the hospital wing quite soon, and Harry was lowered onto a bed. Madame Pomfrey fussed over him and administered a healing spell and a potion to him immediately, somehow managing to question Hagrid at the same time. "Buckbeak, well, Hippogriff, for Merlin's sake, he's not dangerous. He's tame as a baby." The matron's ministrations took a short while to work, but then the pain in Harry's arm subsided, and he felt more or less okay, if a little weak from blood loss. Once Madame Pomfrey had left his bedside in order to jot something down on an official-looking slip of paper, Harry got his first chance to address Hagrid's guilt. "It's not your fault at all," he assured the teary giant. "Madame Pomfrey's fixed me up so, and I'm good as new, see? If anyone's to blame, it's Malfoy." Hagrid's grief transformed into fury in a matter of seconds. "That little brat," he growled, "insulting Buckbeak. Well, a hippogriff ain't gonna like that, is he? I'll give him detention until the end of the year for that." "No, Hagrid," Harry interrupted, quite alarmed. "Please don't. Malfoy will complain to his daddy, and then it will all go to hell in a handbasket." "To a where?" "Never mind, just leave Malfoy be. He's a moron for doing what he did, but it'd be way worse if he was here, because then he'd set his father on you, and he's really influential. Only be careful with the next creatures you show us, okay? So that, they're not so easily provoked by twits like Malfoy." If Harry had known his plea would result in them studying flubberworms for long weeks afterwards, he wouldn't have said anything. As it was, though, he'd managed to calm Hagrid enough for him to go and relate the incident to Dumbledore. Harry could tell that Hagrid was worried about his teaching career. It did not look good if the boy who lived was injured in your very first lesson, but hopefully he would be okay. Once Hagrid departed, however, the place at Harry's bedside was taken by Blaise, Millicent, and Neville. Harry's three friends had never been in each other's company this way before, and unease between them was palpable. Blaise and Millie kept glancing at Neville with suspicion, while he wisely chose to sit on a different side of Harry's bed from them. Up until now, Harry had managed to keep his Gryffindor and Slytherin friends separate, and he really wasn't sure that the time to bring them together was now, when he was weakened by hippogriff assault, but he would just have to roll with it. "How are you, Harry?" Neville asked. "I didn't really see what happened." "Malfoy should really learn to keep his gob shut," Millie said coldly. "What possessed you to take the blow for him?" "A subconscious death wish?" Blaise raised his eyebrows. "Piss off, Zabini," Harry muttered. "I didn't think far enough to realize the hippogriff would get me instead of Malfoy." "Didn't think?" Millicent deadpanned. "A bit Gryffindor of you, wasn't it?" Neville squirmed.
I'm not sure Malfoy is worth risking your life for, Harry, he chose to say. Judging by Millie's look, Neville had just failed some sort of test. Malfoy was so scared he was green. Too bad you couldn't have seen his face, Blaise noted airily, but with gleeful malice in his voice. I have to agree with Longbottom here, though. Try to refrain from jumping into the path of danger for his sake in the future, will you? Harry rolled his eyes. Sheesh, guys, one might think you're worried over me or something. He knew he'd scored a point when both Millie and Blaise looked uncomfortable. Neville, however, only opened his eyes widely.
Of course we were worried, Harry. There was blood everywhere, and—
Speak for yourself, Longbottom, Millicent interjected frostily. Neville looked lost. Oh, Millie, you wound me. You wound me, Harry droned, trying not to smirk.
And you, Potter, are treading on thin ice, she snapped. I'm done here. Coming, Blaise? Hey, will you let me copy today's notes from you? Harry asked.
Millie narrowed her eyes. Harry made his resemble those of a kicked puppy.
Oh, fine,
Millie huffed and stalked out. Blaise cracked up.
Get better, Harry, all right? Common room banter will be so dull without you.
He briefly glanced at Neville and inclined his head.
Longbottom?
See you later, Blaise, Harry nodded. Give hell to Malfoy for me. Blaise's smirk was positively malevolent as he left the room. Neville looked slightly shell-shocked at the Slytherin interactions. Harry found himself pitying the Gryffindor a little, so his smile was somewhat softer than normal as he uttered, Thanks for worrying, Nev. What happened after I got, stabbed?
Oh, nothing much. Hagrid told us to go back to the castle, and that was all.
Neville shrugged.
Hermione wanted to visit you too, but Madame Pomfrey only allowed 3 visitors, so—
Harry let out a non-committal nose. He wasn't sure he wanted to deal with Granger right now, anyway. She remained more Neville's friend to him than his own, somehow. How is she? I haven't seen much of her lately, he felt compelled to ask. Neville smiled.
Oh, you know Hermione. Buried in work, he said, lightening up. She's taking every single class on offer this year, even Muggle studies, you know?
What? Harry blinked. How is that even possible? Muggle studies, of all things? He rolled his eyes. So, how are your classes so far? You're taking divination, right?
Yeah,
Neville shuddered.
That was creepy. The professor predicted I'd break a cup, and I did, and then she told Ron Weasley that he was going to lose a trusted friend this year. Hermione thinks it's all rubbish, but she's also miffed because the professor told her she doesn't have a very good aura for the subject.
Neville snickered. Harry stared at him. Hermione was in your morning divination class?
Yes,
Neville confirmed.
Why?
She was in my morning arithmancy class too, Harry answered succinctly. They gazed at each other in incomprehension.
First period today?
Yes.
Hermione was there?
Yes. They stared at each other some more.
Does she have a time turner or something?
Neville muttered. Yeah, right. Like they trust a 13-year-old with one, Harry snorted. However they discussed the issue, they could not find a single solution to how Hermione could be in 2 places at the same time. Harry had valiantly tried to convince Neville that Hermione must have magically cloned herself, but Neville collapsed in a fit of laughter and was subsequently ejected from the infirmary by an irate Madame Pomfrey. Harry's stay in the hospital wing was really boring after that. A couple of weeks later, Malfoy was holding court with his sycophants as he sat on a snake-ornamented couch in front of the fire in the Slytherin common room. Harry gritted his teeth and tried not to listen, but it was getting increasingly unbearable by the second.
So, yes, knowing that, I just can't believe Potter isn't trying to hunt Blackdown himself.
I mean, I would, had I been in that position. Harry threw his quill down. Millicent frowned at him.
Are you actually going to fall for his—
Harry didn't respond as he stood up and stormed over to Malfoy's side. Enjoy talking about me behind my back, Malfoy, he snarled.
Oh, I would say the same to your face,
Malfoy assured him serenely.
I mean, look at you, just sitting in the castle like a good boy, when the murderer of your parents is on the loose.
Harry felt suddenly light-headed. What are you talking about, Malfoy? He demanded. Malfoy's eyes widened.
Oh, you mean you don't know?
He asked, tone delighted.
You mean nobody's told you that your darling godfather betrayed your family?
What? You're lying.
Oh, no, it's the absolute truth. Everyone knows it, of course. Oh, well, everyone important at the ministry does, but they thought you didn't need to know, huh? Well, I'll do you a favour, Potter, since you ask so nicely. Harry's hands were balled into fists. Malfoy, this tragic story starts way back in the day when your father, James Potter, befriended your godfather, Sirius Black, Malfoy said in a dramatic manner. He was best man at your parents' wedding and all, and then they went into hiding because of the war, and performed the Fidelius charm. Harry was aware that they'd attracted the attention of most people in the common room by that point, but he was only focused on Malfoy. So? Do you even know what that is? Malfoy's lip curled in disgust. The Fidelius charm is one where the secret of someone's location is hidden inside the soul of another person. If that person tells no one, the secret is safe. Malfoy smiled maliciously. Harry was beginning to see where this was going. Sirius Black was your parents' secret keeper, Potter. As soon as they performed the charm, he went to the Dark Lord and spilled the beans. Then, whoops! Your parents are dead. Very tragic, don't you find, Potter? The common room was deathly quiet. You're full of shit, Malfoy. Oh no, this is the truth, Malfoy shrugged. My father told me this summer. He's a friend of the minister, you know. And the minister was there when they arrested your godfather. He'd just killed 13 muggles and a wizard. Shut up! And you know what the best part was? He was laughing, Potter. He was happy he'd betrayed your parents. Your own godfather, Potter, how does that feel? I think I've told you to shut up, Harry snarled in a voice he didn't even recognize as his own. He didn't remember the last time he'd ever felt so angry, like he'd burst, like he wanted to lash out and hurt someone the way he'd been hurt. There was lava boiling in his veins. Malfoy looked somewhat alarmed, but continued on to say, Potter, don't take it so hard. Aren't you going to thank me for letting you know? And then Harry lost it. He didn't know what possessed him to start hissing in Parseltongue, but it seemed to be the best way to express his fury, and then there were snakes crawling all over Malfoy, upholstery snakes from the couch were slithering up his arms and chest, and Malfoy was screaming and trying to fight them, but they were holding him down and getting at his throat, and— "Stop it, Potter!" Someone grabbed his arms and was shaking him. Harry tried to jerk away, but couldn't, and gradually he focused his gaze and saw two chasers from the Quidditch team, Pusey and Warrington, trying to catch his attention. They looked terrified, he noticed. Glancing towards Malfoy, he saw the blonde was grey with horror. As soon as Harry snapped out of his trance and the snakes stopped moving, Malfoy jumped up and ran away from the couch and ran for the door, Parkinson hot on his heels. Everyone was staring at Harry again, like they'd done after the dueling club incident, and Harry felt pinned by their gazes, aware that he'd been so close to doing something completely unforgivable, and seeing the wariness on Blaze's and Millie's faces, he broke away from Pusey and Warrington and marched towards the exit. The crowd parted before him without protest. A small first-year squeaked in terror as he dashed out of Harry's path. Harry left, slamming the common room door behind him. He was vaguely aware that he was trembling, and that he had no clue where he was going. His mind was a whirl, not capable of focusing on a single thing for more than an instant. Malfoy's face, gloating, and then the same face, contorted in fear, Sirius Black from the wanted posters, Harry's parents in the mirror of your eyes. He thought, I'll kill him, and then felt horrified by what he'd nearly done to Malfoy. Did he have it in him to murder someone in cold blood, if he was so disgusted with himself now? Could he avenge his parents after all, hunt Black down and kill him, rip him apart? Oh God, he felt nauseous, and did this make him weak, or did this make him strong, that he wanted so badly to destroy something, and felt so sick when he did it? I hate it all, Hedwig, I really do, Harry muttered, reaching a hand out to his owl, and suddenly realized that his feet had taken him to the owlry, judging by the fact that he was there, and had no recollection of anything that had happened on the way. He thought of what he must have looked like, walking through the halls, zombie-faced, empty-eyed, oblivious to the world, a mask of hatred on his features, and shuddered. I hate it, he repeated. Hate what, Harrykins? Harry spun around to see the Weasley twins standing behind him. How do you always sneak up on me?" he scowled. "It's a skill passed down through twins in the Weasley family for generations," Fred said with a straight face. "Anyway, so what do you hate, our Slytherin friend?" George inquired, leaning against the wall and looking as if he had no intention of leaving any time soon. "My life," Harry snapped. Fred's eyebrows rose. "Is that teen angst I detect in your dulcet voice?" "Shut it, Fred," Harry warned. The boy raised his hands in surrender, but his eyes were still alight with mirth. "As you wish, your Slytheriness," Fred bowed. "However, what brought on this bout of contemplation?" George continued smoothly. Harry looked at them. "I've almost killed Malfoy," he confessed blandly. Fred and George exchanged glances. "Since you say almost, should we assume that the slimy little git is still befouling Hogwarts with his presence? Not that it would be a great loss should he stop existing. It's not funny, and I'm not joking," Harry shouted. Fred sighed. George looked heavenwards as if praying for patience. "Well, do you regret trying to kill him, or not succeeding?" Harry stared at them. "Because you see, if you regret that you tried to kill him, it means that there is a hope of making an upstanding citizen of you yet," Fred explained. "Whereas if you regret not succeeding, there's always the next time," George concluded. Harry didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. "You're both insane," he said instead. "And planning to make a career of it," Fred agreed. Maybe that's what friends were for. Despite not having solved any of his problems, Harry felt better for having talked to the crazy duo anyway. And although he'd been dreading the return to the common room, nobody said anything on the subject of his breakdown, that night, or ever. The only indication that the incident had taken place, apart from Malfoy avoiding him, was that nobody dared to sit on that couch again. It became Harry's own, informally, and only he and his friends ever occupied it, at least until after he'd left Hogwarts. The upholstery snakes seemed to have taken a liking to Harry besides. They would slither around and hiss at people who dared approach. Blaise thought it was great. Millie never offered her opinion, and Harry felt half disgusted, half amused, as the couch he sat on swore floridly in Parseltongue. End of chapter 4.